Good morning, everyone. While we wait for a few more people to sign in, we'll just do some opening comments. Say good morning. Welcome back to Consultants Corner. We kind of have a new topic for you today that we have not covered in previous sessions. Before we dive in, we know there's some new attendees every week. So before we get into it, just wanted to quickly introduce the few of us who will be participating today. Myself, Dov Horowitz. I've been a consultant and worked with CSI for a couple of years now, specifically on the physical security side and the procurement side, right? Navigating these complex grants. I was previously with DHSCS, kind of working with them on the inside of the grants. So hopefully that enables us to share additional specific information. Again, of course, we cannot speak for any of the agencies, but we can help guide you through the process. And real quickly, just for Ilya to introduce himself again, and then we'll get into the session.
Hi, everybody. Ilya Umansky. Pleasure to be with you, and thanks very much for joining us. I've been a consultant for over 20 years, first in-house at Prudential Financial in Newark, New Jersey, and responsible for global operations. Then went into proper consultancy for 11 years, and I worked with a company called Kroll. Then yeah, that took me to all sorts of destinations around the world. So some of the projects I worked on, they span pretty much the physical security world, as it's called, the cybersecurity world, and everything in between. I also work a lot on investigative work. I've been supporting the community since 2005, thanks to a person whom everyone knows, Mr. David Pollock. He brought me into this and gave me an opportunity to pay it back for all the kindness I've received from the community. So I'm very grateful to be here and to keep supporting everyone.
And so everyone, especially for those of you newer here, but let's reiterate it to everyone who's participating, the purpose of these Consultants Corner webinars is that post-grant process, meaning you've already applied, you've already been awarded, and you're somewhere in that what I call of executing contracts, EHPs, bids, the whole gamut. We can't cover it all, obviously, in any issue. We try to keep every episode to a specific topic. Obviously, we always like to refer back to the actual material that's provided by the agencies that administer these grants, but we kind of want to be that in between, that resource to you. Speaking of resources, on the call, we also have a couple of our regional security directors, Seth Goodstein from Queens, Bill Hayes from Westchester and the Bronx. Every area within the New York City that we cover, we have a specific regional security director that is your resource for a gamut of security assistance, but including grant procurement. Additionally, Jamie Matos, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, keeps all the gears turning, but also is my partner when we do kind of one-on-one calls with organizations, helping them navigate the grant process. Obviously, we can't do it for you, but we can often help people take that step, get over that speed bump. Today, we're taking on a new topic that we haven't covered over the past few years because, right, we know the latest state hate crimes grant allowed for a good amount of funding specifically for cybersecurity. And the reality is we all know that it's a real threat area. It's a vulnerable area for all our institutions. But the problem is, as much as little as we know about the physical security side, maybe we know even less about the cyber side. And the truth is, there is a cyber interplay between a lot of your electronic systems you use and cyber. There is that interplay, but even more, let's back up. We're going to back up a step before that, and just today we're going to talk a little bit more about this overall cybersecurity concepts and what we see in the field. To do that, we have brought in CSI cybersecurity expert specialist Jeremy Paulson, who will introduce himself in a moment to kind of walk you through it. The goal being that understanding what is this world of cybersecurity at a very basic level, and then therefore to make the best decisions as you purchase and as you go forward through your grant process. The one thing I want to share, because I am not a cybersecurity professional, I can do the basics, maybe break my computer, maybe log into the wrong thing, I can do those kind of things. But the big message is when I think about cybersecurity, it's still very similar to our approach to protecting from physical threats. It's about who and what gets into our system. How can you defend against that? what do we have to be worried about, and what our tools are to protect ourselves. So if we think on that basic concept, it kind of helps simplify this world instead of getting into all the jargon in different concepts. It's thinking about how do we protect our network from someone else getting in. Same thing as our front door, protecting from someone else getting in, just a little bit different tools, but that concept's there. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ilya. He obviously has background working in that interplay between the physical side and the cyber side a little bit more, can give his sense about how to work with whether it's vendors or other professionals in the field to ensure you get the most out of your program. So that I'll turn it to Ilya.
Thank you, Dov, very much. I will not take too much time because we want to really give Jeremy an opportunity to address you all and to share with you his experience. Dov and I discuss cybersecurity just the same way as we discuss the rest of the support, the rest of the solutions that the community receives and that the community has to deploy after they receive grants. One thing that arises from my personal experience is that there's a lot of talk, well, this is the user's problem. How is it possible? How stupid could users be? Well, I'm here to help you rest assured that this is a fallacy, at least from my experience. It's a fallacy to assume and to think that the user is the problem. I can only refer you to a very popular and very experienced person whose name is Ira Winkler. And Ira currently runs at a very senior level cybersecurity at Walmart. And so addressing a very large community of cybersecurity practitioners, which is the RSA conference a couple of years ago, basically his message was, what are you guys all doing? Why do you think that the users are the issue? How about just flipping the script and actually saying, haven't we complicated these systems enough so that the users are completely lost? Why do we have to think that and blame the end user, like Dolph, myself, and anyone else who has ever held a smartphone, right? I mean, if you think about what we have in our smartphones, we only use about, 30-40% of all the features that they're packed with on a good day, right? So imagine the entire world of these bells and whistles around us. And yeah, we focus on writing up a letter or creating a spreadsheet, or maybe every once in a while creating a fancy slide deck. Some of us are dabbling with this new thing called AI, right? But all of those things have so much complexity to them. Ira's message was very clear to me. It very much resonated both through the projects I've done and the experience I've had, is that it's very unfair for us to turn to you and to say, you're not doing something. Because as we say to you in our other webinars, even if it's related to the world of physical security, is that we completely respect the fact that you have many hats to wear and that very few of you, if any, are security professionals. It's not fair for us to say that you're making mistakes, not at all. It's just, it's our job to help demystify some of these concepts. And that is why we have Jeremy with us today. So without further ado, I want to pass the baton to you, Jeremy, and to help us get into the weeds of what you see, help us demystify some of these things that still continue to be some pain points for our community.
Okay, thank you, Ilya. As for myself, I actually come out of a national security background. I worked for the Institute for Defense Analysis for a number of years down in Washington, D.C. Amongst the various studies I did there, I actually ended up writing a couple of papers to Congress about an incredible horror of a software development process called the Defense Travel System. Since then, I have gotten a CISSP, which is one of the highest levels of certification available within the cybersecurity sphere. And I have been doing this work for CSI since 2001. I should also mention, I despise computer security jargon. I think it is designed entirely to keep you people in the dark and to make these supposed experts seem to be more impressive. I don't see how that serves anyone. Here's how you have to look at it. Your crown jewels, the things that you really care about, your operations, your bank accounts, your membership lists, all that data that keeps you guys going in a cyber environment is represented within the blue highlighted elements inside of this screen. The way I want you to think about cybersecurity is the green items. The green items represent a kind of quilt or even an onion of security that surrounds your network and keeps the bad guys out and keeps the good guys in. And the primary vector for all of this is the internet, represented by that white, rather yellow arrow up at the top. Now, the rest of these items I will explain. Firewall. Terrible name, classic for the industry. A firewall is nothing more than a set of filters. What it does through a set of rules is trying to keep the bad sites and the bad people out of your network and allow the good stuff in. The next item on this list is authentication. In short, ID, password. For those of you who have multi-factor authentication, you get that 6 or 8 or whatever digit single-use password that ultimately gives you access to the network. What is the real purpose of it? To make sure the good guys come in and the bad guys can't get it. Now, past this, we have this thing called endpoint protection. Once upon a time, it was referred to as antivirus. However, the sophistication of these things have increased. The bad guys' viruses have gotten worse and more adaptive. And so we now, because the industry loves new words, endpoint protection. What is endpoint protection? I'll tell you what it is. Basically, it is a piece of software that observes the traffic that goes in and out of your computer and in and out of your networks and looks at its behavior, and this is at the higher levels now, and goes, wait a minute, should it be doing that sort of thing? Like, why is it accessing your financial information if it isn't really supposed to be? Or why is it attempting to spread itself through your network? And what a good endpoint protection solution will do, it'll shut it down. It'll take it, the infected device, off of your network before it can spread the virus. That's why it's so important, because from that point, you can reintroduce stuff and get your system up, and the damage is never that great. The other element, and the reason why I don't put it in front of your network, is backup systems. Backup systems are basically copying. In the event, used to be originally, it was all about, oh my God, my computer broke down or my hard drive failed and I've lost all my data. Nowadays, backup systems are utterly critical to defending you against ransomware, defending you against malware, defending you against both hardware and software failures. And the way it does, ideally, is it creates a series of time-stamped copies of your data. And each of these copies are inviolable, which means they are not vulnerable to ransomware. So if you do get hit with ransomware, you go sufficiently back, you test it, and you find the one that isn't damaged, and then you just use that data set, upload it to your computers, and you're in business. Now, almost all of these different systems are available as software. Firewalls are typically as hardware, but they don't have to be, because we have software firewalls, we have firewalls as a service. Same thing with authentication, endpoint protection, and backup systems. All of these can be as a service, which means you've got a company out in the blue there that goes, okay, don't worry, we'll take care of it all for you. All you have to do is set everything up and we will do all this for you.
Mentioning backup systems and ransomware, right? Can we just explain a little bit more what that kind of ransomware move is and how the backup system helps that?
Ransomware is a program that gets somehow infiltrated into your network. And what it does is it takes all your data files and it encrypts them so you can't read them. Increasingly, the guys who do this lovely stuff also exfiltrate vital information, threaten to reveal it, and possibly they will insert a piece of software that acts as a backdoor that enables them to reinfect your network. These are things you really don't want.
Right. So if you have a backup, ideally multiple backups, if for some reason you can't access your current system, you can bring it back to life because you've been backed up, ideally within what? What's the deal recommended time frame?
Honestly, I think you should be doing a backup every day.
So it's daily. The impact on your business, on your operations
Is
is
as
minimal
minimized as
because you have
possible.
it. Right.
Okay. Common vulnerabilities and pain points. Now, I've done hundreds of assessments over my time, and these are the typical failure points. Unpatched software. The whole point of software patching, which is, say, updating, is so that any security failures are closed by the vendor. You really got to do this constantly. Set it up as automatic. Observe it, get your IT people to check it out every week, honestly, and just update. Second major failure, obsolete operating systems. Operating systems where you're talking Windows or you're talking the Apple operating system, or if you're talking about Linux, and then there's Chrome has, I think, a separate operating system of its own. These things come out in versions. And in the case of Microsoft, which is probably the single most, Windows, the single most used operating system in the world, is they release a version, they will continually update it to a certain point, and then when they decide that they want to make more money off of you, they issue a brand new operating system. Now, what happens to the old operating system? Oh, they'll sort of support it for a few more years, and then you're cut off, which means all the new software failures are not being patched in the old operating systems. So this is their way of propping up their share price, for lack of anything else. And for a lot of people, they assume, well, the thing works, there's no problem. Oh, yeah, so, and they don't even know how obsolete their operating systems are. You need to keep them current. If you don't keep them current, what will happen is that some bright ransomware guy will figure a way to get in to your network, into your operating systems, because they're making use of known exploits that were solved and cured subsequent after that operating system was no longer supported. And here's the last one, lack of cybersecurity training. I have it on another slide, I'll mention it here. 80% of all data breaches, according to the most recent Verizon Data Breach Report, 2023, thank you, indicates that nearly 80% of all data breaches are caused by ignorant or untrained staff. Why? The people who are doing the phishing, the people who are basically trying to get into your networks, are clever SOBs. They utilize all kinds of psychological tricks to get inside your staff's thinking and get them to click on something or open an attachment or something else that is really not good. But if they panicked or they think, oh my God, I just won something, this is one of the ways they do it. Now, here at CSI, we have a free cyber hygiene training available to all your organizations, accompanied with, and I make this point, training should be accompanied with phishing simulation. Phishing simulation is basically something that looks like a phishing attempt, but in point of fact is kind of a test, and you find out who or who doesn't fall for it. This highlights, first of all, who your potential vulnerability points are. And it also highlights these people may need more training. All this is available through CSI at no cost to you.
I just want to add in or reiterate on that critical point. If we're seeing, like Jeremy pointed out, that the most vulnerable area is the human side of it, but we're going to be relying on special hardware and cool cyber pieces, but it's the human, it's our understanding, it's how we use it. And honestly, it's the same with the physical security side, right? If you put in great doors, but you haven't designed an access control system that supports it well and trained your front door, staff or the people within your building how to greet someone, how to let someone in, kind of undoes all your good work. So it's just such a critical piece of it that with all the other elements, the hardware, the software, the new components, the updates, the patches, without this critical piece, how much have you moved the needle? And that's what we wanted to make sure you're aware of. And like Jeremy said, service that CSI does.
It's almost like buying a bulletproof door and keeping it open.
Yeah. Here's another thing I want to make clear. There is no such thing as 100% security in cyber. It is a fast evolving environment. There's a lot of monetary inducement for the bad guys to do this stuff. And it is constantly evolving. It's an eternal cycle of attack and defense and attack and defense. The idea is to reduce your vulnerabilities as much as you possibly can, in some sense, being aware that some bright character somewhere might end up finding a point around. But if you keep on patching, if you keep your stuff up to date, it is going to be much less likely. Here's why it's so damn important. Defense in depth. This is why we have these layers. Firewalls, authentication, endpoint security, backups. You need defense in depth. Why? Because you never know where the bad stuff is coming from. You want as much coverage as you can possibly have. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Patch constantly. And train your staff in cybersecurity hygiene and reinforce it with phishing simulations. This will really up your game and you will be less vulnerable. Close it out. CSI cybersecurity resources. We are here to help you. We do assessments. The assessments will both indicate to you where your vulnerabilities are. Also, this is something you attach to your New York State hate crimes grant and will be used to support your grant request. We produce a monthly newsletter, which highlights in common language, because I despise jargon, cybersecurity concepts, emerging issues, etc. Again, training. We provide training. Additionally, as you guys get further into the process of procurement, one of the questions I'm hearing is, great, you said we need cybersecurity. You said we needed a firewall. What should I buy? Okay. We have in development right now, just about done, a booklet which breaks all this down and gives you an idea where the pricing is and what are the better products. This is done relying on Gartner, which is a well-known, very highly regarded software and hardware reviewer. And so we take their recommendations, we modify them some so that you guys have a sense of, well, do you really need to buy the high end? Chances are, no, you don't. Your networks aren't big enough. It's too much of a drag on your budgets. We provide lower cost alternatives along with the higher end stuff too. Should be out within a month.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy.
Anytime. Hope I wasn't too strident.
Just to reiterate on the resource booklet, with the demand both the organization CSI assists with for assistance with cybersecurity, and as well as the ever-increasing threat from the cyber perspective, right? We can't ignore that. A, we brought in Jeremy. B, Jeremy's team is growing, and they're looking at how they can be that continued best resource to the community. So again, whether you have the grant or not, most likely if you're here with Consultants Corner, you have a grant, but definitely take advantage of the training, if you don't have an assessment from us yet, please feel free to reach out and coordinate with Jeremy the same way you would ask for a physical security assessment. But what almost seems that our kind of newest, biggest lift, what Jeremy was talking about, the resource booklet. We really hope, like Jeremy was explaining, to kind of sift through the weeds for you. And it wouldn't be specifically our recommendations, but what we've pulled together from Gartner, right? That resource that Jeremy mentioned. Feel free to look them up as a tool so we can have that available for everybody. Either go to Jeremy or might be the best way through your regional security director to get access to it. And the truth is, and I'm throwing Jeremy on the fire, as we get into the procurement process for this, just like many of you have probably done one-on-one procurement calls with our team, if there's a cybersecurity question, we'll coordinate and try and bring Jeremy to the table as well. The same way we help with both the grant rules, the physical security setup and arrangement and purchase of the best equipment to achieve your goals. But we'll bring Jeremy to the table to help really talk you through it and have you understand it personally. What we want to do here, though, is just lay the land a little bit. This is very new to a lot of people. Even if you have an assessment, what did it really mean? What's that next step? You got the 50 grand. What's the next step? And that's a whole other side of it, navigating the grant side of it. But we want to make sure you had those first steps. Ilya, Seth, Jamie, anything that you additionally want to add? Bill, I know you're in there as well. Maybe some questions you're seeing in your regions or even personally. I know Seth's working with some cyber grants, maybe wants to share his experience. But if there's any questions also from the audience here, please feel free. We know it's probably so new and not sure what those next steps are. We want to make sure you have that venue to ask. Ilya, anything you want to jump in on? Reiterate?
Just to extend huge thanks to Jeremy for condensing what otherwise sometimes appears very, very challenging content to process. So what you just heard, and I want to reiterate this, is if you are able to implement, if not even all, but most of the steps that Jeremy just mentioned, right, you likely will be much further ahead than most of other facilities and peers that you're interacting with. The challenges arise, and that's what Jeremy kindly pointed out, is in connecting the dots between you as a novice, for example, who is responsible, just got the money, and then is responsible for buying the stuff, right? And the awareness of what technology is out there and how do you sequence the procurement process, right? What should you start with, right? So hopefully, let's say you received the money, and I want to kind of point it back to you, Dov, and to you, Jeremy. Could either of you help us help the community understand? Okay, so the money is available. We still are not sure as an organization where in the cyber domain should we be. What should we be focusing? What's our starting point now that we have the money? How do we organize ourselves to make sure that we're spending it wisely? What would be a good first step?
Well, I would say from my perspective, keeping in mind I'm not really part of the sort of state bureaucracy paper shuffle, is look at your assessment, which you got to apply for the thing. It will give you, oh, you've got a gap here. You've got a gap here. You need to get endpoint security. You need to get, your backup is insufficient. These are the things that will be clearly spelled out in the assessments. Only question after that is, what should I buy?
Right. And I think that opens up and what's that intersection between the funding you got and understanding your cybersecurity and the grant process. I mean, let's not forget the rules stay the same, right? You need your bids, you need to advertise, understanding the thresholds of your cost. But be in touch, ensure you're in touch with your grant rep. This is the hate crimes grant we're mostly talking about today, the $50,000 they allowed for in the last round. So you need to be in touch with your rep at Division of Criminal Justice Services. Now, as we spoke about last week, they're kind of allowing people, which is new to most of us when we used to work with Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services on the federal grant, DCJS allows you to move a little bit forward, even if your contract's not executed. Again, our numero uno advice how to navigate that is just at least don't spend money, meaning on any purchases for security equipment until you know your contract's executed, because then you risk reimbursement. Put an ad out there and you talk to vendors, you got quotes. The damage is actually, there wouldn't be any. The issue is if for some reason you had an issue with execution and you spent money, you potentially might not get reimbursed. I say potentially. DCJS is obviously very different than how DHSES does it, but your contract with these state agencies is actually very similar. That's why we know you still need to advertise, you still need to get the bids, etc. It's not a matter of, some guy in your school, one of the parents has a cybersecurity company. That's great. They can bid, they can give you their advice, but you still need to follow this process. So we kind of need to meld these worlds of the advice that Jeremy gave you both here today and in your assessments, whether from us or from someone else. And don't forget to keep following those procurement rules. We started off quickly we have our disclaimers that we always say in the beginning of these sessions. As new as this grant is, right? It's only a couple years compared to the federal grant. And the newer agency, the cyber component is even newer. So we're still all learning what the allowances and the process is from the state's perspective. So just, make sure we don't get ahead of ourselves. But right now is a great time to start, like Jeremy pointed out, review your assessment. Once you identify those areas you want, and probably your rep has asked you some specific questions about if you were replacing hardware, what specific hardware are you replacing? If you're doing training, how are you carrying out that training? Who's getting it? They want those kind of details as they move that process along from their end. So, and that's what you can be doing right now is starting to familiarize yourself with, okay, we are going to be purchasing hardware. We are going to be purchasing some cybersecurity components. What is it that we need to purchase? What does it look like? What is it? So I just wanted to make sure, we don't forget the grant side of it. And that's why we're doing it here today. We want to kind of bring those worlds together. Any additional cyber questions? Hey, whether you want to hands raise, I see Anne. Not in the chat, maybe Jamie can open you up. There you go.
Yeah, so we don't actually have a cybersecurity grant, but we have a grant. One of our grants is a $50,000 grant to put in a video monitoring system, which we don't have. And we are fortunate that we have a congregant who works in the field of both networking and cybersecurity. So he had implemented, and we're very small. I mean, just so you know, we don't have a professional IT staff. So he had implemented for Wi-Fi a ubiquity system, okay? And what we've come to understand is the video system can be built on top of that. In addition to that, that's where our firewall is, and some of the other things Jeremy's talking about, getting a more robust backup, for example, that's all going to be part of ubiquity. So, I mean, I don't know how to say the question well, but what I'm coming to understand is that this is all of one system in a sense. So, for example, if we go with a video system, which we likely will, where we're storing the data on site, that then ties into our overall system because we're going to be backing up our server and so on. And we've been reliant a lot on this congregant. And so we're also talking about, as part of this process, identifying a vendor who could then also support us in the video system, but it's the same thing. So I guess I'm just this is our very first grant. So just so you understand, we're learning. So the general question is, there's overlap, and how do you manage that? We're kind of thinking what we're going to try to do is fill in some of our cybersecurity grant or gaps as we work on the video grant, but I don't know if there are any risks or any recommendations you would have on how to manage that.
May I break in here?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. There has been increasing convergence between the physical security side and the cyber side, as people increasingly have gone to Wi-Fi and other elements, connecting their video systems, their physical security systems into their internet network. Okay, and there are various things that need to be done, not the least of which I might point out, is if you get a camera that is accessible through the internet or through Wi-Fi, you have got to change the password that comes from the vendor. You've got to. One of the largest botnets, basically slaved distributed denial of service, well, I'll explain that later if you like, attacks that ever happened was some guy had managed to link up a bunch of disparate video cameras by hacking other systems and used this massive amount of various things to attack another network. You know, so right there is that dovetail between physical security and cybersecurity. And that trend is going to continue. You need to be, you know, kind of like everything integrates, everything touches on something else. And that is the way and the trend, I believe, for the technology going forward.
I just wanted to add that since you have this relationship already, and since this person helped you install the Ubiquity system, it might also be worthwhile to ask that same person to connect you with Ubiquity engineering team, because they, as the provider of that equipment, are responsible for answering these challenging questions. What if we add video? What if we need backup? How do we assure that our system is protected based on, let's say, best industry practices, for example, right? Now, the people who can answer that question for you, at least based on from a product perspective, are the people who make the product, right? So I would also recommend, as you are searching for these answers, to keep in mind that Ubiquity engineering team is available and they're at your disposal. So you might want to ask this congregant to connect you, to make a bridge for you with the people on that team, so that you can pose those questions to them, and it'll take a little bit of time for them to investigate what you actually have, and then they might be able to help you.
Yeah, and don't let them flash a bunch of jargon in your face to make your eyes glaze over.
Absolutely.
Demand definitions.
I want to add real quickly that even as, and you hit on all this hits on a very important piece, even when our regional security directors go out in the field and do physical assessments, we actually reference the fact that once it's networked, so if it's your camera or your access control system is on a network, it's kind of has those similar, like you're pointing out very well, Ann, it's part of that network, it has those similar vulnerabilities. Can someone get in there and change your lock timing? Someone get in there and see your recordings? So it kind of, or the data backup of your recording. So it does all interplay. Without going too deep into that, the protections against them are similar. And that's also why we see those federally banned products, because literally sometimes there's that back door into them. That is inherently what these vulnerabilities in. Someone is getting in, perhaps a foreign government is getting into these systems, and they shouldn't be there. Only you and who your organization has approved should be getting in. So, you know, in opening that can of worms for a second, a lot of people ask, well, this is the state grant. It's only the federal grant that bans this equipment. Obviously, there's a legitimate reason it's banned, and, you know, CSI would still recommend you stay away from those types of brands and equipment across the board. We do plan to come back to the table. Like, one thing we do is, instead of throwing everything at you, and that's why these are ongoing sessions, is we learn and we build on the process. We will bring Jeremy in, and maybe we'll get more into some specifics of what we should be looking at. Down the road, a couple months, we all know, let's be mindful, the procurement process for these grants is long. Honestly, except it's probably going to take your whole contract period. So for this grant, it's 2 years. Started a few months ago. The federal grant, 3 years. So if we have that in our mindset and we just move step by step, that's our goal. Ann, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, so we're in the process now of putting together an RFP, right? And I'm just wondering what sort of assistance or help is available to us as we do this. First of all, you know, trying to understand how to do the bid process, you know, since we have certain requirements, so that we follow that process, and also making sure that we develop the RFP in such a way that our our review factors, like when our assessment is right, because if we get a vendor who's going to provide this, it's really critical that they have the capability to do what you're talking about, right? In terms of helping us not just install the equipment, but do the entire secure system.
That's a great question. And actually, I think we'll close on this, and then I have one more comment. But across the board, how does CSI help with the procurement process? First of all, Ilya and myself and our team have covered this topic in detail throughout previous Consultants Corner sessions. So we're in season 3. So we've provided a lot of content, so definitely check those out. I realize it's not the most action-packed movie thriller out there, but the content's there. We really try to put it out there for you. Additionally, reach out to your RSD. And where is your organization? Sorry.
We're in Westchester. Bill Hayes is our person.
Awesome. So definitely always stay in touch with Bill, and he can link you to our team, whether it's Jamie, myself, and if it's a cyber question for everyone else here, bring in Jeremy, and we'll do a call with you directly. If you need additional resources, we can kind of guide you in that way. Again, we help thousands of organizations in New York, so for everyone here, maybe a monthly or quarterly call to make sure you're moving that needle. Especially for those of you newer to this process. But yeah, please do a little bit of homework first. Check out the videos, check out what's on our website. Come back to Bill, say, hey, Bill, we really would love to have a call. Make sure we're doing it right. We have a couple questions. 100%, that's what we're here for. It's a service we provide. You can make a service request just like you make a service request for assessments or cyber trainings. Jamie?
No, I just wanted to let Ann know that I provided the link so she can just take a look at that.
To our archive.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and there's a lot there. You can pick out what's applicable to you, and we don't want to just dump it here and leave you going. A lot of people, this helps them get through the weeds, but we are that resource to get to the next step. Some organizations want some additional help, but the fact of the matter is, some people will go overboard and kind of drown themselves. And what is that balance, that appropriate approach to keeping the needle moving? With that. And I think it's an important point to close on, actually. Last time we gave some homework, right? We wanted to keep this progression of our Consultants Corner, right? Our bi-weekly calls, first and third Tuesday of the month, with helping this whole group move forward. So, and understanding which grant you have is kind of going to dictate what your next steps are and where you are in the process. So last time we said simply to everybody, especially those new, which grant do you have? Understand which grant. There's a couple grants out there, a couple agencies, which makes some different changes to what your next steps are. Understand that and where you are in the process. So I think for that being our next step homework is, okay, we know our grant, right? Which agency, which grant it is, ideally when the end date is of the contract. So then let's identify what is our next step. Right? If we have a federal grant, I think some people are starting to get their federal NSGP, nonprofit security grant program. Some people are starting to get that executed. So if your NSGP is executed, aka in short, signed, there's more than just signature, but let's call it signed and ready for the next step. Anyone want to pipe in? What's next if you got your NSGP executed? That other scary acronym. The EHP, right? So you have some documentation. If you have the federal grant, the NSGP, you need to do your environmental planning and historic preservation documentation, which can be a months-long process between you putting it together and getting to the next step. So we have several sessions on EHP development. We probably will not get into EHP this year too much. If you have the state grant, they're allowing you to move forward and start advertising and bidding. So make sure your next move is, if you have you have the hate crimes grant, and understand what that next step is for you to start advertising for the projects you need while you put together the information about what hardware you want to purchase. All right, that's it from my end. Any closing remarks across the board? And we'll see you again in a couple weeks. All righty, everybody. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay alert, do the smart moves to improving cyber and physical across the board, and CSI is here for you. So please feel free to reach out.